What is up? What is up, Camelback fam? Welcome to another episode of Humble and Hungry, the series where we sit down with revolutionary entrepreneurs who are building ventures in education and technology and changing the game in those spaces. I am your host, Lex Lindsay, Senior Associate of Marketing and Communications at Camelback. And I am super excited to have joining me today Shanté Elliott, the founder and CEO of TasselTurn and a 2019 Camelback alum. Shanté, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lex. I'm excited to be here with you and share our story.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, before we hop into it, I would love to start with just a quick introduction for folks who aren't familiar with you and the work that you're doing with TasselTurn. Could you just share a little bit more about yourself and what TasselTurn is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Shantae Elliott, the founder and CEO of TasselTurn. A bit about TasselTurn: we are an edtech nonprofit, really sitting at the intersection of education, more specifically high school education, and child welfare. The way we go about helping foster involved youth and youth experiencing housing insecurity, our main goal is to help these youth graduate high school, accepted into a post secondary opportunity. And we do this by digitizing the pathway to graduation with our proprietary technology platform. A little bit about myself personally. Originally, I'm from North Carolina. However, Chicago has been home for almost 5 years. So, Chicago is where our work is based. However, our work is national. So, I'm very excited to be here again.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing more about yourself. I'm super excited to get into the work that you're doing with TasselTurn. I'm just excited to share more about your story and get to learn more about what you're doing.
Thank
So,
you.
I like to start these conversations by taking it from the very, very beginning, going to the
Okay.
way back.
Okay.
So, I know we started with a quick introduction, but I want to talk about like what life experiences led you to becoming an entrepreneur and pursuing this journey, and eventually led to you founding TasselTurn.
Yeah. So, in all transparency, I'm sure like a lot of folks, I never thought that a career as an entrepreneur really wasn't what I was going to school for, really what I thought I would be doing, right? And so I think there are various things that kind of became a part of my identity, and then ultimately led me to becoming an entrepreneur. I think one of those first things is my first job after college. I was working in policy and higher education. And a lot of the projects in my portfolio really resulted in college access and helping Black and Brown young people from rural communities of North Carolina access college. And so from there, I saw how a lot of opportunities were really out of reach for these students. In particular, young people who had experienced foster care or who had housing insecurity.
Mm.
And so that kind of alarmed me. But then I think also I was able to identify that concern a bit more quickly and easily because I have a lived experience similar as well as being under guardianship. And so I think from there, around that time, also we did like this, the first social impact summit for the University of North Carolina system, and I was a part of that team to create that summit. And so I was like, oh wow, this social entrepreneurship, I wonder what this is, and all these other things, and kind of I just started looking into like what social entrepreneurship was, right? And
Mhm.
then like I think more experience after that kind of was like, okay, maybe I could do something because what really made me was like my moment of a passion and what really made me want to do something is because I was a director for a child advocacy organization. So after higher education, I transitioned and was a director of a national nonprofit advocating for young people in foster care. And I saw how many of our services really was not were reactive and not proactive. And so I pitched this education advocacy initiative, and our executive director basically said no. And then I was like, well, I think this is really it. And so eventually, like less than like 2 weeks later, I left the organization and was like, I'm going to try to do this on my own. And so that's what happened. And here I am a few years later. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. There's a nugget in there that I'm like, we're diving right into it. this idea of, someone telling you no, and you recognizing a need, and that this dream, this idea has legs, and going with it and taking a chance because you know that it's necessary and needed in the
Yeah.
world. And so I love that you touched on that. But before we go there, I would love to talk about, an experience or a transformative moment or a success story that you've pulled from your work with TasselTurn, that's really impacted you.
Yeah, I will say definitely like when we think about companies and like the for-profit sector, often like founders I know at strictly for-profit companies are like, you always remember the first customer. And so thinking about our work, like I always remember our first students that came with us as freshmen and sophomores in high school that we're now seeing have graduated college. And so one in particular, his name is Marvell. He came with us during his sophomore year of high school. And he had an amazing, bright, young young student, so ambitious, but just needed some different type of support to help him push the level and like really meet his collegiate aspirations.
Mhm.
And so fast forward, he came with us as a sophomore, worked with us and on our platform throughout his high school journey. We supported his transition into college, and he graduated this past May from college from Harris Stowe in St. Louis, and he is now an educator himself. And so that's really exciting. And like things like that and stories like his really motivate us to continue. And yeah, so I think that is definitely like one story that we definitely champion, and so much so that he is still a part of our organization in some capacities. And so it's really exciting. He shared his pathway with us at South by Southwest EDU last March. And
Wow.
so it's stories like that that really let us know that the work is important and that the work is working.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that, oh man, just kudos to like here. I can imagine just like the pride you hold in knowing like we were a part of this young person's journey, and brought him all the way through to him fulfilling his dreams, and now he's just out here
Yeah, doing
living.
it. Now he's outside. So yeah.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So, you kind of touched on this a little bit in your response to our first question of, how you got started, how you started Tassel Turn. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into, some of the challenges that you have faced, and overcome in this work and on your journey. So, what has been the biggest challenge for you, especially as a woman, of color and an entrepreneur, and how have you kind of overcome those challenges?
I think one challenge for me in this position is not having as extensive as a network. And so by that I mean like, I know founders who know people that are like on the boards of like these mega companies, and so like they start companies and their pathway to success is like 12 months journey, and I'm like, of course it is, right? Like you can call the CEO of this billion-dollar company. I get it, right? And so I think that is definitely something that I wish that we talked more of, as far as like what that networks look like, what a professional network kind of looks like, and then how often those networks are first curated from your family or by your family, right? Like you come from generations of working folks, and they know folks, and they get promotions, and then their circles are more extensive, and then they go to, they're out on the yachts or out on the golf course, all these things, right? And so as a Black woman founder, that really wasn't, my story. And so having to also use time to start a company, build a company, while also building my professional network so that I
Mhm.
could become more proximate to spaces and people with influence definitely has been a journey. And it's always something that I am trying to redefine. So I think for me, that's the first one. And then, of course, like the issues of funding, but I think something different from the conversation is the type of funding. And so often as a Black woman founder, and a part of our sustainability is through like traditional grants, often we see that a lot of grant makers um, want us to do everything with like a small figure grant. However, our counterparts, they've done nothing and they get like these large six-figure checks. And I'm like, what is this? Um, so I think those are definitely like two of the things that have been very interesting as a Black woman founder in the social space.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were just talking about in another interview, we were talking about like social capital and like how important it is to build those networks and, just being out there connecting with people. And
Yes.
I would love really if you could share some advice with folks on how you've tackled that challenge, and
Yeah.
building up those networks and getting into the spaces and places that would be beneficial to you.
Yeah, I think for me, something that I've had quite a bit of success with is that actually being and introducing myself to conference organizers.
Mm,
So the organizers really may not always have an external part of like the conference or the gathering or anything, but they know all of the business. Like they know everyone who's going to be there. They know like how to get on the stage, how to get support. They have the power to like make things pro bono, like if you can't afford it. Like that has definitely been like that is actually how I how I got to South by Southwest EDU 2 years ago, and then the following year we had a session. And
mhm.
so like I think that's definitely something, like getting to know conference organizers and sending quick thank you notes after conferences, and also letting people know that, hey, I have this subject matter expertise and I'm happy to have a conversation about how we can support. That's definitely been something. In addition to that, I think LinkedIn has also been helpful in the way that I kind of use LinkedIn in these like professional networks, as far is more so like seeing um who like viewed my page, and then trying to go from there to like see maybe what ranks they are and what type of organizations they're a part of, and then I reach back out if they don't like seek to connect with me or something like that.
Mhm.
So I think there are ways to be strategic, but I also want to like, building a network and social capital is definitely not talked about enough. But there are ways to like be strategic to go about it. Yeah.
Oh man, thank you so much for sharing those actionable items. That is something, yeah, we haven't really talked a bit or much about, like how do you go about building up your professional network. And so those tips, I hope y'all had y'all
Yeah.
notepad and pen out. If not, you're gonna have to watch the replay
Yeah.
and take those notes down because that was those are some gems for sure.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I now want to shift into your fellowship experience. You are a 2019 Camelback Fellow,
Mhm.
and I am curious to know, how has the fellowship, your experience in the fellowship, really helped shape your growth as a founder, and what impact did it have on your ventures growth as well?
Yeah, well, I will say that Camelback was our first institutional investment. So that was like our first institutional support. And I do believe that some of the ways that the fellowship experience kind of helped us and helped us grow is one, in addition to, as we just touched on, like social capital, right? So being in a fellowship experience puts you in position to build your social capital, one with your fellows, but also through Camelback, who also put us in proximity to grant makers, to folks in higher positions at for-profit companies, easy, like warm introductions, air quote, that we say in the sector, right? And so I think that's definitely it, like continuing to expose and build my personal social network and social capital. But then I think also as an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs start off as like the first employee of the company. And so often you're doing all of the things. And then for something that I identified during our fellowship is like, there's an entire back end of an organization, i.e., like tax forms and making sure you have all
Mm.
of the entity and the paperwork set up so that when like you can receive money. So I think that Camelback definitely was helpful in helping us think about venture establishment, which ultimately we see today helped us like become more sustainable, just from a back end infrastructure component. And then I think another way that I'll touch on is one, just communicating the organization. Often when you are like a solo founder in the beginning, you're talking to yourself a lot about the organization, right? But then like you're also like talking to friends, whomever else, right? And so having the opportunity to communicate what communicate our work in a safe space with fellows and with other leaders, and then to receive feedback and support in different ways was also helpful.
Oh man, that is so wonderful to hear. Yeah, we don't hear often like the stories folks talk about, the building the back end of the organization and what happens, like kind of the nitty gritty. Those
Yeah.
aren't the things that we talk about. We talk about the sexiness of it, of like
Yes.
the freedom and the
Yeah.
community that we're able to build. But like
Yeah.
those background things are just as important, like really vital, right? That's the foundation.
Absolutely, absolutely, exactly. Like, and that is the part that, like you said, like it's not glamorous. I absolutely hate it, but like it's important. Like, if we don't have that, if we're not in a good position, we can't accept money. Like, we can't, like, we can't do our work. So, like, it absolutely sucks. But yes, 5 years later, I can confirm an accountant is necessary. You need to know. you need you need multiple bank accounts. Like, you need to do trademarks. You need a lawyer. Like, all of these non-sexy things are very necessary. And like the sooner you just, maybe not retain, but like the sooner you set yourself up and like create that checklist, the better.
Awesome. And I'm glad that Camelback was able to support you in that
Yeah,
part of it, for sure.
yeah.
So now that we've heard a bit about what got you started in entrepreneurship and how you founded TasselTurn, the work that you're doing now, I want to take us to the future and talk about, what is your legacy when you look ahead 10, 20, 30 years from now? How do you hope that the work you're doing with TasselTurn impacts the education system and foster and housing insecure youth? How do you hope that your legacy impacts those spaces?
Yeah. So when I think about the demographic of young people that we specifically serve, it is my hope that in our service to them and our uplifting of their stories and helping them, turn their tassel at graduation, is that the education system and sector um, accepts that, one, these students do exist, right? Like, they are in your schools, they are in your classrooms, and they are just as capable when you give them the opportunity to succeed. And you do not have to pity these students, because often, and it's from a heartfelt position, I get it, but often what we've discovered in the work is that the expectations for young people that we work with are just super low. Like, educators have low expectations, the social workers have low expectations, and often it is because they say, they're in foster care, their housing insecure is so challenging, all the things. And I understand it, I accept it, and I don't think it's from a negative place.
Mhm.
But so I hope that the expectations are raised for this demographic. That's like number one. I think from an institutional standpoint, if we could get the child welfare side to like play with us a little more strongly, um, I would like for a part of my legacy to be that, hey, was the TasselTurn was an organization that led to every foster care involved young person receiving an education coach at age 13. Because the data and the science shows us that when a young person is still in foster care at the age of 13, it becomes less likely that they will be adopted and ultimately age out or transition from foster care.
Mhm.
And often, young people in foster care don't experience conversations around graduation and college until like 17 years old. And
Mhm.
that is because they're going to be aging out of foster care at the age of 18. And so I think those two things, if either of those, hopefully both of those can be a part of my legacy, I would be happy with that.
Absolutely. It's so interesting. I didn't know this, but as you said it, I was like, it seems innate, like when foster involved youth at 13, if, aren't placed, who is having those conversations with them?
Right.
We
Right.
families are typically the ones to have conversations with this person, and
Exactly.
we wait until 17 when it's like, next year you're graduating. Have you thought about this? It's like, well, I didn't
No,
even know I was
actually.
supposed to be thinking about this. It's like
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
with the kids at
Absolutely.
home.
He's absolutely. And like when we think about like the lived experience, is that, like you said, often these conversations happen in family circles around, sometimes I call them like dinner conversations, like
Yeah.
dinner table talk, like your parents went to college and like you learned about college through osmosis. And that may look like your parents talking about going to homecoming or talking about something that happened in the dorm one year, right? Like these conversations aren't happening at group homes. They're not happening in youth shelters, right? And so like we got to make sure and accept that, hey, I appreciate and understand the initiatives targeting low income, first generation Black and brown students. I understand that. And we also need to make sure we go to the shelters because there are also kids living in shelters, living in group homes, and living in residential facilities that need the same and often more support as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just thank you for I just want to say, the conversation is not over yet, but just thank you for the work that you're doing because it feels like a population, a community that is overlooked. It's a community that's overlooked. We don't often hear about foster involved youth, and those conversations need to be happening in those spaces for those children as well. So just
Absolutely.
thank you for the work you're
Yeah.
doing.
Thank you.
Um, and so you talked a little bit about this as part of your legacy, but when you think about just your personal legacy and what you want to leave behind for the future generations, what would that legacy be?
That's a good question. And it's actually something that I've started to kind of conceptualize and like even like think about because it's also like I'm still very young. So I'm like a legacy, I don't know. Like I still have time, right? But it is my hope, especially when I think about like my nieces. It is my hope that they can, as I'm someone who has various identities that intersect. So I'm a first generation college grad. I've gone from foster care to PhD, and like I've done so many different things. And so I hope that a part of my legacy is that, like, one, you can do it, right? Like, you can really do the things that scare you. And like, it won't be easy, but you can do it. But then I also hope that, and I know a part of the reason that I've been able to get into this position is that I am like too curious. Like I ask every question. Like I interrogate, I think, I am a thinker, I do all the things, right? And so often curiosity is not really seen as something necessarily positive. Like some people like don't like questions. Like, what are you asking all these questions for? Why do you want to know this? All these things, right? But I hope that there is a level of curiosity that my nieces also see in me in a way. I think as women we are not always supported in being curious and like going into these institutions, with ambition and things like that. So as a woman, I would hope that my legacy can like helps people see that, hey, you can do very difficult things, but like how you start really does not determine how you finish. And like you can have every ambition in the world as a woman and you can succeed and continue succeeding, and you can be curious and challenge these institutions and these structures, right? And come up with something that's sustainable, to help.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that. I love that. I'm gonna make sure that my nieces watch this
Yeah.
episode because I think often think the same thing for them, like especially around this piece of like challenging and asking questions. I feel like we see it so much within this younger generation of kids. Like they challenge everything.
Everything.
Everything. Like,
Yeah, they
no,
do.
I'm not falling
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, yeah,
Which I
they do.
really appreciate. And sometimes I am caught off guard, like, why are you asking
Yes,
all the questions, man? Just do what
yes,
I. But they're like,
yes,
No, this
yes.
doesn't feel right. I don't like it. Explain why you want me to do that. Why are we doing
Exactly, they do, they do, and it's like you said, like, wow, let me find an answer for you, right? But I'm also like, I love that you're saying that, like, you're like, yeah, do more of it, like, yeah, so
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. So as you think about the work that you're doing with TasselTurn and this future, this legacy that you are wanting to create, how would you define impactful entrepreneurship?
um, I think there are various definitions, but I think one that sits most with me is that creating a change in the marketplace or in the institution, that is long lasting. And I think for us, one example of that goes back to a part of the legacy for the organization around like ensuring that as soon as a young person in foster care turns 13, they receive a personal education coach. That is a change in the practices of the institution of foster care, because that doesn't happen at all now. And so when I think of impactful entrepreneurship and impactful entrepreneurs, I think of a long lasting, almost permanent change within a given sector, institution, or marketplace if we're thinking of like traditional for-profit companies.
Yes, absolutely. This idea of, shifting and creating legacy that lasts 7 generations down the
Yeah.
line. Heard that talk, heard that phrase, heard that mindset a few times. But yeah, just going in and
Yeah.
shifting
Yeah.
the system, shifting the
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, as we kind of wrap up here, I would love to know what's up next, what's happening in 2024 and beyond for TasselTurn. What do you got in the works?
Yeah, so we have a few things. Obviously, our team is always growing. So we have some really important hires coming down the pathway that we're very excited for. We also have our first issue brief going to be coming out next month as well. And so we've been doing this work for some time, and we finally have some key data points that we were able to go in. We have our first issue brief coming out, which is also exciting. And then as a part of this journey, like we pivoted our model several times. And now we're excited that we have very strong school partners that have partnered with us. And so we're going to be serving about 2,500 young people on our platform coming on in Q1 of this year. So that's very exciting for us. So we have a lot of things happening, and anyone watching or listening, follow us on social at TasselTurn across all channels or platforms.
Awesome. Could you speak a little bit more? I want to dive just if we can really quickly into those last two, the issue brief. What is that?
Yeah. So students, we did a study where we interviewed several students on our platform, and what we know a lot of young people in this with this lived experience carry is like their in school experiences are really not healthy and often are re-traumatizing. And so we did a study on the coping practices of housing insecure young people. And some of our initial findings from this issue brief show that, like, in order to cope and endure and navigate school as a housing insecure youth, that youth really had like 3 common coping practices that came out as themes. And one of those coping practices includes using the concept of vision boarding to chart their future path and like show and help them become who they ultimately want to be through the practice of vision boarding. Another coping mechanism that young people demonstrated was using non-traditional curriculum to educate them on life practices. So one young person in this study said that he watches like Tony Robbins self-help videos before school and like in his social worker's office to like help him with wellness practices and like help him get his mind right for school, right? Another student also said that he listens to artists like Gucci Mane and like how he talked about how he, his experience growing up and like how he is now like this successful musician, right? And so this is important because it shows how schools can create learning environments to support the coping practices of students, which is something we don't currently see. So we're very excited about it, and yeah, very excited. It took a while for us to get here to this place to where we can provide these types of insights, but it's always been a goal of ours. So yeah, we're very excited for like the way that we are going to be contributing more externally as an organization this year, while also continuing and growing and supporting more and more students.
Oh my goodness. I'm excited to check this brief
Yeah.
out. And I'm like, once it's out, please let us know so that we can spread the good word, because I know that there are so many schools and people who could benefit from this information. And just as you were describing it, I'm like immediately thinking of some fellows who I'm like, oh, we need to make some connections here, because they could be implementing these practices in their education system, or even just a part of the programs that they offer. Like, oh, this is gonna be great.
Thank you.
And the last piece I wanted to jump into was the partnerships that you're launching in this first quarter. If you could talk just a little bit more about the platform and what's going on there.
Yeah, so anyone who may be watching or listening who may know a housing insecure or foster involved young person, young people can apply directly themselves by visiting our website, TasselTurn.org, and there's an apply button at the top. So if you want to share, feel free to do so. In addition to that, we also have institutional partnerships with secondary high schools. And so we have several school partners in Chicago coming on and signing up their students, all of their students who are foster involved and or housing insecure onto the platform. And so what we know from this is that to really create that legacy and like that impactful and be impactful in the sector and change the institutional marketplace is that we also do need for these traditional systems to one, acknowledge that we need this, but then to come on board and sign up. And so we're excited. So we have about 10 new school partners in Chicago who are going to be signing up their students who meet our demographic of young people that we serve. And this will help our schools because they will, one, know who these students are, because often a young person is in school and no one knows that, like, of their lived experiences, but then also help them create and increase the capacity that they're able to and how they're able to support students from a school position. So we're really excited about it. And partnership information is also on our website as well.
Awesome. We'll be sure to drop that in the comments for folks as we're chiming in. Thank you so much just for sharing all of this information and giving us some encouragement and some advice. As we start to close out the conversation, I would love to ask if you could give yourself, your younger self, one piece of advice about the entrepreneurial journey in pursuing this. What would that piece of advice be?
I think it would, I'm trying to think, because in no way do I say this as a contradiction. But I do think that my younger self, I would really, really challenge myself to think of a more direct for-profit strategy instead of being so strongly positioned for like a traditional structure of a 501c3. And there are various reasons for that. I think also a part of this journey is around like ownership and like what that looks like when you're when I'm no longer CEO. What does ownership for me look like, right? So there are like conversations to have, right? So that's one thing. And then I think maybe something more, a little something more. I think it's like to also continue to get experience before you launch your endeavor. I know, like, in this world of like Forbes 30 under 30 and doing everything on your dream list before 25 is like the thing these days. But like be patient. Things take time, and like it's okay. It'll happen. Like whatever's for you is for you. It'll be there when you get there. You don't have to rush it. But I think also like patience, because when I started off with TasselTurn, I was definitely quite impatient, and just thinking about my younger self, there was also this thing of like patience and thinking that, oh, I have to do this before 21 or before however old. And it's like, no, you can take your time. Like good things take time, and that's okay.
Yes, no, I appreciate you sharing that as a reminder, because I think, in the work, we're all just like wheels turning, trying to get something done. And we have societal things that are coming up about, oh, you have to have accomplished this by 30.
Yes, it is insane. Like it is so much. Like I'm like, if you do everything by 25, what are you gonna do at 45? Like what happens, right? Like you just gotta. And then I think there's also a side of the story where we don't talk about like most successful entrepreneurs. Over half of the more successful entrepreneurs started their companies in their 40s, and like on the second half of their career, right? And like we don't talk enough about that, and like it's okay. Like we appreciate the list, and most are deserving, but it's not the end. Like if you don't make the list, it's okay.
You can still be out here
Yeah,
successful, flourishing, and
yeah,
thriving.
exactly. Like you can still do it. Like it is totally okay.
Oh
Totally okay.
man, I appreciate that call out. And just that reminder, like you said, most people are not successful entrepreneurs aren't starting their companies until they're in their 40s because
Yeah.
they have all of this experience, all of the
Exactly.
lessons that they've learned that they can then say, you know
Exactly.
what, let me transform the industry. This is the issue that I want to
Exactly.
tackle and how I'm going to transform it. Oh man,
Exactly.
thank you for that reminder. Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you. So
Exactly.
as we close out, you have dropped it a couple of times, but just to have it nice and wrapped up in a bow,
Mhm.
folks want to connect with you to learn more about the work that you're doing with TasselTurn. If they want to get involved, if they want to support, or even reach out to talk with you about entrepreneurship, what is the best way that folks can connect?
Yeah, so a few ways. I think the most direct way, you can connect with us, our organization at TasselTurn across all social media platforms. Connect with me directly at Shanté Pioneers across social media. And then if you're just on the website or going to the website at a computer or anything, there's a contact us page directly on our website as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, Shanté, it has been so wonderful talking with you, getting your advice, your encouragement, your story about the work that you're doing with TasselTurn. We really appreciate you joining us today and sharing those experiences.
Thank you so much. Happy to support and share.
Awesome. Awesome. And thank you to our viewers. Thank you all for being here. I hope you grab some nuggets. If you missed anything, check out the replay. Go back, get your pen and paper out. We hold these conversations every month. And so be sure to check us out for our next guest next month. Until then, take it easy.